Hello, my name's Chris Jantzen. Welcome to the Freedom Under Natural Law Conference. Number 2, the Convergence. My website is endevil.life, and you can also find me on the onegreatworknetwork.com. Very glad, honored, and proud to be here speaking before you today, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to check out what I have to say today. I did a presentation last year in the Freedom Under Natural Law Conference, the first one, and it was called The Ultimate Connection. Ultimate Connection was all about our connection to God, to reality itself. And there is quite a bit to be discussed there, and I would recommend going to freedomundernaturallaw.com and scrolling, finding my last year's presentation when you get an opportunity, because it's really good information to lead up to what I'm going to talk about today. Today's presentation is really aimed for a pretty specific audience. I really am reaching out to folks who have already looked into the topics of natural law and freedom and truth. People that have already kind of gone through the experience of making these major realizations about the world and the occulted secrets and this generational mafia that's kind of taken over the world in terms of the New World Order. If these ideas sound outrageous to you, this presentation really isn't directed at you, although I think there's something to be gained from what I have to say here for everyone. But I just wanted to say up front that the most people that I've come to recognize that have come to check out my podcast and my work on endevil.life have been folks who have already kind of been introduced to the work of Mark Passio and the whatonearthishappening.com website and podcast. And I really want to give credit to Mark Passio and his work. It's been the major influence that inspired me to do this stuff that I'm doing now. And his invitation that brought me onto the onegreatworknetwork.com was a huge inspiration and motivation for me to keep trying to reach out to others and learn to get better at helping to talk about these subjects. So as I've come to recognize the problems in the world, and you and I have all seen the amazing and wild things that have happened since 2020, I think that have been so extreme, it has really opened a lot of people's eyes to the extent of the tyranny and how embedded in our world the evildoers are at this point. And so real quick, my definition of evil, I'm talking about basically people stealing from one another. And stealing can take many forms. Lying, murdering, and I'm using that term, stealing, just like Mark Passio does, because it makes a lot of sense to me. And all these amount to what we're experiencing in the world right now is slavery. It's humans controlling the choice and rights of other human beings. And for many people in the mainstream, many people I even speak to, the word slavery comes across as too harsh. But for those of us that have really looked deeply into these problems in the world, we recognize that that word is actually quite appropriate. So if you're someone who's still struggling with this idea that, hey, we're free, we're in America, we have all these wonderful things, I want to let you know that I do appreciate the many things I have and the comforts. I'm sitting at a nice chair right now. I have the opportunity to spend the time to create a presentation for you, and that there is quite a bit of luxury of freedom that many people in the world do not experience. That being said, the problem of slavery continues, and I suspect, based on the trajectory we're on, if we don't change the way we're doing things and increase our understanding of objective morality and help others to understand natural law consequences, we're all in for a future that really we don't want to see. And many of us whose eyes have been awakened in 2020 and since see now just how bad this problem is. And that is motivation to change and do something about it. So this presentation is really after I've been thinking a lot about these problems and doing podcasting and coming to the realization that I need to come up with an even better tactic, and I need to find a way to give people information, motivation, and inspiration to move forward on actually making the changes we need to see in the world, so that our children don't wind up basically in like the Matrix, where you're born inside of a computer's control. And I feel like we're getting that way with the digital tracking of everyone, the censorship, and the lockdown type of maneuvers and the furthering of the limiting of our basic rights. So let's move on to the slides, and please understand as I come through this today, my hope is to encourage you, to motivate you, and to inspire you. If I'm bringing up something that seems negative or difficult, it's only so that we can understand these obstacles and then get beyond them, not linger and get stuck on them. So what I'm here to talk about today is humanity's most powerful weapon. I think we have a very powerful weapon that hasn't been employed, and we have the potential to employ that. So I'm going to start with the first section. I also sectioned off this presentation into 3 sections based on the theme of this conference, which is a trivium style way of thinking, is to discuss first in the beginning the ideas, the problems, and then in the second section we're going to focus in on the issues in that problem, and what are the sides and what are the arguments that we see in dealing with this problem. And then the third section is about the solutions and the action-oriented aspect of this journey that we're on. Those of us who care about freedom, those of us who care about truth, and those of us who have come to this understanding of natural law being the principle that we need to recognize in this world. So my first slide I'd like to share with you today is one that's kind of a leftover from my last presentation I did on endevil.life before I took a break from podcasting. And it was sort of a primer, a warm-up to this presentation I want to give you now. And I am pointing out here that there is inactivated potential within all of us. Everyone here today are people that do care about freedom, I hope, and that do care about truth, and do care about exposing what really matters and teaching the next generations coming forward the importance of respecting one another's right to self-defense, one of another's right to choose whether we want to do something or not with our own body and our own mind. And really what this takes is us putting our energy together. Even if we have our own individual views, we can still all put hands together and unite when it really comes down to something important. And ultimately, that's the only way that we're going to deal with this problem with humanity, is working together. So this presentation is really to inspire, motivate you, the listener, to work on combining your energy with other people of like minds and forming groups, teams, tribes, whatever you want to do, word you want to use, maybe starting off with one other person, forming connections, and then working together and learning to coordinate our energy and cooperate until we can make powerful difference in the world, just as the evildoers have. So we need to learn in some ways from other people and other things in the world. So what I'm going to bring forward in this first section are some examples of basically teamwork is a good thing. And so many of us have trouble recognizing this truth. That teamwork not only is a good thing, but it is crucial to the advancement of freedom for humanity. So let's check out this quick little video here. So we see here these guys working together on a project. Each of them are individuals. They're each carrying their own tool. And yet when they work together, dangerous tools, no doubt, but they're managed to be doing it in a very coordinated manner. And they're all saving energy and they're all saving time. I would suspect one of these guys could not show up to work one day and the other ones would still know what to do. And they would still be able to pound in the stakes. So this is a good example and inspiration for all of us that things can be done better in teams and groups when we're coordinated and when we're on the same page. There is great power in working together, and teamwork is not a bad word. In society, I think often teamwork is hard to be seen as a good thing because it's so often used in such a way where authority takes abuse of people. And this dynamic makes teamwork seem like it doesn't work. However, when we all put our minds, hearts, and souls in the same place, We don't want to become collectives. We don't want to become a society that just does what we're told, but we do want to work together for a desired outcome, as we saw with the gentleman with the hammers pounding in the stake. And we also see many examples in nature, and that's something I'm going to repeat in this presentation, have you look and think about the symbols and the teachings of nature. As I pointed out in my presentation last year, I see nature as the living Bible, and it offers many lessons for us so that we can learn from the examples of nature. Although we're different from bees, we see how bees work together, and it's very incredible the technical skills that they employ and the way they're able to do things as a group, defend themselves, create honey. You know, without bees, would we be able to have harvests of our food? You know, we are already working together with the plant world and the animal world. We can't help it. It's the only way we do anything. And that's part of what I always like to symbolize with my tree of life symbol that I use on the end evil symbol, that we're interconnected with everybody and everything around us. That being said, there's been a purposeful division in the world. And what I like to call this is that we're like lost tribes. You and I and most of the people we knew, if we look back at our history of our families, we come from different places, different groups, different nationalities, different backgrounds, and we're all sort of shoved together, which, you know, they call it the mixing pot. When I was young, I've heard it described as a salad, a mixed salad of all these different, which seems great in some ways, but the other side of it is that we're lacking a cohesive structure of our shared ideals and goals. And when you see, when you think about like a tribe, for instance, people are sharing information over generations, and we're lacking this information. And what is done is we'd scattered us in all different parts of the world. Many of our fathers, mothers, grandparents come from different places in the world, and we're all kind of a hodgepodge mixed up. Now we need to recognize that although there are some good aspects of that, the bad aspect is that we're not able to retain a lot of information and knowledge and support from a community, as you might see in a tribe, where people are living close together and they rely on one another, and they learn that the importance of relying on one another. So being that we're these lost tribes, we find ourselves very scattered and fractured and compartmentalized. And you can see this in many aspects of our society. We can see it in the traffic jams. We can see it in the housing tracts that are packed in close together. We can see it in office cubicles. We're very used to this lifestyle where we each drive around in our own little individual car, and we each go in our little individual house, and it has a zombifying effect. And there are some good things. We all want to respect our individuality, which is important, and people get to make their own choices is the idea, right? However, this compartmentalized lifestyle we live actually does the opposite of bringing us together. I've had the experience of living in both a city environment and a more suburban or a more country environment. And what I found is the more you get people packed in tight, the less they communicate with each other for the most part, and the more they learn to ignore one another and ignore one another's needs. And so we start outsourcing responsibility. So this fractured, compartmentalized aspect has been done great damage, and it's part of this problem I'm describing with the tribes of the world being lost and scattered and not having unity in purpose or unity in belief and understanding of what's going on in the world, and not sharing with each other the stories of our ancestors. So we've had to, very late in life, many of us come to these major recognitions and realizations about the problems in the world. One of the biggest problems in the world is that there's entrenched power. You know, when you look at something like one of these castles, you can imagine how long it takes to build something like this, how much money and energy and time it takes to make something like this. And historically, we know there have been kingdoms and kings and legacies and people who have controlled the power in certain areas for a very long time. The longer you control power in a certain area, the more knowledge, history, you could say they've saved up books, information, and in many cases that information and knowledge has been sequestered away, hidden You know, like you can imagine in the top level of this castle, they have their secret library, and that information isn't generally available to all. It may be just within the family that owns this particular, and I don't know where I just got this particular picture of a castle online because it looked cool, but what it represents is this idea that much of our power is hard for us to really grab a hold of and use because it's been hidden from us. And we've had to come to recognition of the actuality of the situation in the world much later in life. I didn't realize until I was 40 some of these problems. So there's this thing of accumulated knowledge that happens over generations. And this is something that's hard for folks to understand when we talk about the New World Order, the people in power, the great conspiracy, we could call it. Many people have trouble with this idea that, oh, there's this one kind of mafia or bad guy who's in charge of the whole world. That can't be the case, right? But what can be the case is that there are entrenched families, dynasties over many, many generations that have accumulated knowledge and kept that knowledge to themselves, and they're using it against us as a power differential. And we can see that in history, when you look at many awesome structures, pyramids, and such, that there was great knowledge and technological power in way back in history, some of which we still do not know how to access. And so it's very evident that this is the case, that there has been great knowledge and power in ancient times and in history that has been hidden or lost. Libraries that have been destroyed, and every time one group has defeated another group, they take with them the knowledge, and often it doesn't pass on to the next generation. So all this is just to say that we have a lot of work to do in terms of coming to the realization of the lost knowledge and power that people may once have had, or maybe coming to this knowledge and power for the first time as humanity. And we have a golden opportunity right now because we do have this opportunity to come to realizations and share information that we've come to realize with others. And it's very important because now is the time of like the great Pandora's box of information is all out in the world, and people are being fooled with all kinds of tricky false information. So what we need to do is get at the things that are most crucial, and this is where I come to principles and the importance of understanding morality and what's right and what's wrong. So we're at a huge disadvantage as people in this world who are divided, and we don't have that extra power and accumulation of knowledge and tools that many folks in the world have gathered. So what does that mean for us? Should we give up and get depressed, or do we use that as motivation to move forward and do better? And that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that what we do have the opportunity to do now, is to begin rebuilding our tribes, our lost tribes, and take these sections of society that are fragmented and disjointed and begin to integrate ourselves together. And the important aspect of this is that we have to take the responsibility for these connections and for solving these problems in our local communities, rather than having the expectation that government or social services are going to do those things for us. Because as long as we keep relying on those services, then we cannot rebuild our power. Our generational power will only be built with our willpower and our desire to want to live with one another and to want to share goods and to be willing to make certain sacrifices on that path, which is the difficult part of this whole process, is that none of this is going to come easy. However, to make it a lot easier, what we do is we work together. And what we're really lucky in this world is the great intelligence has provided us with all these examples in nature, our living Bible, to show us how things can be done. And obviously we're much different than the bees, as I described before, and the geese or the birds. However, we can notice what they do and we can learn from their skills. And when we look at the geese, we can see how they have some pretty complex systems of organization. They're also very simple. When they fly together, they create a pattern in the sky, and that pattern has a lot of real world self-defense and self-preservation aspects to it. The geese, when they fly, they protect each other from wind shear. They take turns flying in the front, and that protects the bird behind them. They take turns taking that lead position so that none of the geese get too tired. When one geese falls behind or becomes injured, there's a system that people have observed where another goose drops off the pattern and goes and helps the one that falls. And they have a communication system where they honk, and it's speculated that honking is a way of encouraging and communicating with the rest of the group to keep the group moving and to keep the group on pace. I found, being a camp counselor many years ago, that starting a song and singing with the kids would help them work through the frustration and boredom of hiking and feeling tired. So one of the ways that we can really create strong unity is that we protect one another, and then we share our skills, and we learn to do things with other individual beings, just like the guys hammering the steak at the circus. We're all individuals. We all have our own responsibilities. We don't have to be a collectivist Borg, and we can still do amazing, great things together. And this is the trick that I think some people get stuck on, that things have to be all one way or the other, that we can't have teams and groups because there's going to be tyranny. Well, part of the way we eliminate that tyranny is by being strong as individuals, and we're going to get to that more in the last section. But for now, what I'm really trying to make the point in this first section here is actually, what is a team effort, and why aren't more people voluntarily working together? We see it sometimes in churches and volunteer agencies and nonprofit agencies, where people do come together and do things. And then we also see in society that teams perform the most complex tasks, whether it's a surgery, and I have the picture of the doctors here, or a team of carpenters building a house, or a team of accountants figuring out finances. We always use teams, and there's very few jobs that are just one person doing a thing. Most things require a group of people who all have the same understanding of the tools and the processes involved to varying degrees, and they all play their part, and that's what creates a cohesive whole. So we need to translate this way of doing things into the freedom movement, into the truth movement, into those of us that are teaching natural law. And I'm seeing this in some of our other presenters and workers, like we're doing here in the Funnel Conference. We're coming together, we're converging to bring information from many points of view to make it have a stronger impact. And I see other people on the One Great Work Network trying to combine with each other and do interviews together. We need to move this forward, this process of coordination. It starts with making a connection with one other human being, and then from there we can build. But we can look at examples of nature and examples of things we actually do in nature, in society, to see that we do need multiple people. We're not a solitary species. We're not just, there's not just one ant, you know, and we're all alone out there. We're not alone. We're tied together with all the people around us, and the decisions and the choices people make around us affect us, and there's no way to completely escape that in this realm. It's just the way things are. So what that comes down to is, how do we be peaceful and how do we make change? Well, we have to recognize this aspect of reality, that we are interconnected with each other and we're interconnected with nature. And what nature teaches us is that it is possible to cooperate. And we can see that very clearly, like I'm saying, if we look at the amazing things that bees do, or the amazing thing that ants do, or the amazing thing that geese do. Obviously, we're much different. We have a more complex brain. We're able to reason on another level. We have the prefrontal neocortex, which allows for some capabilities that bees and ants don't have. So that should allow us to do what they're doing and more. However, we look at bees or ants, and they seem to be outperforming those of us who care about freedom and those who care about love, because we, in the world, we're being owned and guided by evildoers who are doing terrible things to children and practicing human slavery and trading humans and putting most resources into psychological mind control. So how do we work against this tide? Is we recognize the power of nature and the power of what we can do to work together the way that nature does. There's another little clip I'm going to share with you. I'm going to play this clip at fast speed because it's kind of a long one. But it really exemplifies what I'm talking about. Let me make you full screen so you can check this out. This is called Balance. You can look it up yourself. It's an animated short. I'm going to kind of go through it a little fast. We have these guys standing on this platform, what seems to be in the middle of space. Every time one guy moves, everybody else on the platform has to sort of readjust, right? And they're doing this fishing thing. I'll move it forward a little bit. And they pull this box up, right? Now, this is the part I'm going to let it play a little bit because it's kind of neat how they did this in this animation where every time one person moves, everybody else has to move. You know, they don't want to lose this treasure. And they've already recognized by virtue of the world they live in that every time one person makes a movement, it affects everybody else. Okay? Here we go. Now we see as the one individual figures out this music box, plays music, it creates a stir. And the other people in the group want to experience that music, so they adjust the platform. And then this process goes on, and throughout the rest of the film, what you see is it becomes a bit of a fight, right? They start to argue over this box, and little by little, people start getting knocked off the platform. So the selfishness of the one overrules the peace of the many. And in the end of this clip, everybody falls off the platform, and it gets down just to the one last guy who's left there with the box that he cannot reach or touch without losing his own self. So this is a very symbolic of the problem. And I think I've done a good job here of describing the problem that we all face in this world, that selfishness and people wanting their own individual thing has caused problems where we've pushed other people aside or we ignore the needs of the many and the way that we affect others. And really this is the heart of what the teaching of natural law is about, is understanding that the things we do affect others and the things others do affect us. And that's part of the reality we live in, and it cannot be escaped. You know, it's the same in that clip as falling off the edge of the world, the edge of the plane of existence, right? We stop being able to exist. So let's look at focus. Let's focus in now. We know the problem. People aren't working together well. They're not respecting individual choice on the one hand, and then on the other hand, individuals aren't taking that responsibility in order to have the group progress, right? And we're being owned by people that have power. So what do we do about it? Well, I'm going to give you some examples, and we're going to discuss in this section things we can do and examples of the way things are done and the way these problems can be solved. And so I look to the Amish community. Very interesting video clip here where you see a call went out to the Amish people. Within a couple days, hundreds of people show up, and they're able to put together a barn in a matter of days. I think they can put together one of these huge barns in 2 days or less. And doing it all without power and without vehicles, using horse and buggies and hand power. And then they have their own families helping make the food, and everybody knows what their job is, and those who don't are taught by the others in the group, and they all share similar values and morals and work ethic. And so they're able to accomplish a seemingly impossible and amazing task that most of society is not able to do at all. Why is that? You know, this is the crux of the problem. Why, you know, these groups like the Amish are able to complete things that the rest of us are not able to do. So how do we, you know, obviously we don't want to force dogma on one another. Many of us don't want to wear the same clothes as everyone else, and you know, I mean, it'd be pretty hard for most people to give up their electronics. I'm not saying to go join the Amish and become an Amish person. Just like I'm saying, we don't need to try to be exactly like the bees or the geese. Obviously, we can't fly or make honey. But what we can do is learn from the examples of nature, and we can learn from these examples of people that have done powerful things in the world and accomplished pretty amazing tasks. So what is the actual thing that the Amish have that's so powerful? And I'm going to point out that it's the currency of trust. This is worth more than money. This is worth more than most weapons you could own, is being able to trust people and having people trust you. Ultimately, if things break down in society, if things get worse on the physical plane, this is going to be the most important thing you have, is being able to trust people and knowing people that trust you, so you're able to share energy and exchange goods. None of us are going to be able to come across every good we need all by ourselves. Where very few people have that type of level of skill or preparedness. There may be a few, but for the most part, and if we want to make this change in the world we're describing, all the more reason why we need to develop trust with our fellow human beings. And I think it makes sense to start with people that have the similar core values and similar understandings of what's going on in the world, so that we can focus and tackle those problems together. It's going to be very difficult with people that don't share the same understanding of what the problem really is, which is this corruption of authority and this misunderstanding of how our rights are supposed to work and what rights are inherent. So how do we actually do things without authority? Many people think it's impossible. When I talk about the concept of anarchy, to live with no rulers, people say, oh, then we're going to be owned by all these gangs and we can't protect ourselves and we can't do anything. And I'm going to go through a lot of those illusions and try to break them down. I'm doing more of that in an upcoming presentation called Shattering the Illusion, which is coming up later this month, put on by James Cordner and Joe Murray. And I'm really going to talk about those illusions that trick people into thinking it's not possible to work together. We're like these little ants trying to move this log. We have to communicate with each other. We have to make a connection with one other individual and start to come up with a plan. It's not always going to work the first time. It takes trial and error. That's why we need to get started and be inspired. If the ants can do it, if the bees can do it, if the geese can do it, we can put our complex brains to this task, and we can do it too. And we can do better. So I'm saying these things not to depress you and say it's impossible, but to say it is very possible. We need to get working on this. And it's really not a bad thing. It's not a scary thing. It's actually really fun to work together with other people. We look at people that work together for many years, like people that do productions together, and they get good at it. They're able to impromptu come up with the right line, like I'm showing here, people that are doing acting, right? These actors of Hollywood have managed to mentally manipulate our whole society, and the people behind them engineering these shows and what's being said. We can do a similar thing in a more honest way as a truth community and a freedom community, is form groups where we put on productions and we help teach other people a better way to live. We help teach other people about the problems in the world and illuminate the problem and then illuminate the solution, and we work on them together. So a small group can change the minds of many people if they work together. And when we're having fun and doing it because we care, we're going to be a lot more effective at that. So don't be discouraged. Be excited about meeting other people and working together with other people and making these connections and forming these networks. It's really the only way to move forward. When we look in the world at things that have happened in the past, whether it be wars or new borders or things being formed, evildoers have done an excellent job of working together and forming tight groups that can be dropped into a place and take it over very quickly. And they're doing things in an evil way in many times. However, we can take some lessons from their methods of organization and training and preparedness. We can do these things by choice and without force, and in the manner of self-defense, and learn how, as groups, as teams, to work similar, to learn from what militaries have done. There are a lot of aspects that they do, for instance, training, right? Training, working together and working with the tools. In some case, that's weapons, right? Some of our weapons in the truth community are our computers and our programs and our ability to interface with these things. We can do this in a similar way in terms of training one another and working strongly together without authority forcing us to do it, can't we? If we can't, then we're lost. Then these teams of evildoers are going to be able to defeat us because they're just going to be better at it, because they know how to work as a team. And we can do that same thing, but better. And so this is inspiration. We can take lessons from the systems of organization that exist in the world now and reinvent them in our processes in a way that's showing how to do it right, right? What are the actual mechanics of how to do that? Well, part of what holds us back is we know that there's some people that are lazy. We live in a world where many people have been indoctrinated and trained that it's okay to let other people control our choices. And some people hang back and they don't know how to be part of a group. Well, that's why we need to start working on it and training each other and teaching each other and working on things together until we get better at it and working through those struggles. So that's really the huge emphasis of this whole presentation, is to encourage you to reach out to other people. And then we're going to get into soon the discernment that goes in that process. But the point being, you look at ants, they're mind-blowing. They will take over your whole kitchen if you like. And they don't seem to have the type of brains that we do, so we should be able to do better. So we can work out these details. We're smart. We have the ability. And if we don't, what's going to happen is we're going to be further divided and we're going to fall. And we can look at the technological power of the powers that be in the world, the governments, the systems in place now, and they have an incredible advantage over individuals. And that's because we're not united and because we don't know how to act as a group. And like you can see when people are flying these planes, it takes a lot of training, I'm sure, to fly planes in a formation like the geese, right? But if they're able to do that, it's very powerful. So what if we're able to follow this allegory, this metaphor, and use this in our systems of teaching natural law, of helping other people understand the importance of freedom and the importance of understanding inherent rights, right? And the definition of what natural law is and how it plays into our life. We're not going to be able to do this just by one person doing it alone. And obviously there are more than one person now. You can see all of us here coming together for this conference. But this is the beginning. Now I want to encourage all of you to go out and do similar things. Reach out to someone else in the community. This is called networking. And there's a natural energy exchange that happens in networking. I like the picture of the fish because it sort of shows there's a self-defense aspect here. When fish swim together in a group like this in a school, they protect one another. You know, the sharks might be able to eat a few fish on the outside, but they can't get them all, right? And the fish also hunt like this, and this is how they catch their food, by working together, by working as a team. There's a bunch of individual fish, they all have their individual minds, and yet they're able to work as a cohesive group, a cohesive team, using their instinctual ability. So we can take examples from this. We can learn from this. Each individual is necessary and crucial. We need all the people we can get. So we need to think a lot about the natural energy exchange that occurs between us and other people. And I'm turning a little bit of a corner here in this presentation because I want to start talking about this energy exchange. Anytime you have a conversation with another human being, anytime you have an interaction with another human being, there's an energy exchange. Some people are what I would call energy vampires. They go out in the world and they try to suck other people's energy. They're heavily critical. You know, you can tell after you spend some time with somebody who's draining your energy, you time and energy into a person that just sucks all your energy. So it's important who we choose to spend our time with and to be discerning about who we network with, right? If we're not getting back good vibes from someone and they're taking our energy and not giving it back and expecting us to do all the work and they're not willing to help, then there's somebody who's not providing that natural energy exchange. Maybe they don't have the ability, maybe they don't have the strength. However, what we need to do is build ourselves up to where we have this emotional strength and capabilities to give a fair energy exchange with people and balance, right? When someone gives you something, you give something back as much as you can. And that's a responsibility and the goal of all people that want to be part of this greater movement to make the world a better place, to make a better future for all of us. So this is the importance of networking, building a network. Building a network happens through trust. Like I said, the currency of trust. How do we build trust with other human beings? Well, it starts with communication. When you first make a connection with another human being, then you start communicating. You go back and forth. And when that person communicates back with you and you communicate back with them, you build a little bit of trust, right? And then over time, as you go through things together, maybe you have to have a little bit of a disagreement. If you're able to get through a disagreement or a little trauma with somebody, it builds even more trust and it makes the bond even stronger. If a little disagreement or argument completely splits people apart and they allow their emotions to get in between, then they don't have that opportunity to build that shared trust. So that's up to each of us to have the personal strength and skills to pursue a relationship, to keep trying, even though it gets a little difficult sometimes. And if you work through things and somebody else keeps putting out that arm of support, then you know you have someone who's worthwhile to be with. If someone else does not help you when you need help, it makes you wonder, are they somebody that you really want to trust, right? Were they there for you when you needed them? I'm not saying you only give people one opportunity, but we need to be discerning with people. And we want to build trust with the people that are deserving and that actually are there for us. So it's important that we are somebody who puts our arm out to help other people and help them through trauma when they're having a hard time, so that then they can reciprocate when we need them. And many of us get burned in life, and we start losing the want and the ability and the need to help others. And so what we need to do is work through that trauma and recognize that, we all have brain damage. We all have problems. We've all lived in this society where we've watched this Hollywood crap for years, and we've been inundated with these religions and this religion of politics and government and these ideas that are toxic. And it's been thought out in think tanks. It's been thought out with social engineering as many ways to inhibit our growth, right? We've been inhibited chemically. There's chemicals going into our water, our food supply, GMOs, radiation coming from devices. We have off-gassing of chemicals coming from plastics, carpets, things all around us. We have chemicals being sprayed into the sky in the form of geoengineering and chemtrails. We have all kinds of toxic chemicals, stuff they spray on food, right, to kill bugs supposedly. And so many of us actually have physical brain damage. I think probably all of us to an extent, including myself. We have to work through these problems. So this is kind of like understanding where people are coming from, why they're hard to get along with. Part of it is having empathy for other people. They're damaged, they're screwed up, they've been through a lot of trauma. We all are, because we've all been in the system of indoctrination, slavery, and tyranny. So don't expect people to be perfect. None of us are. We have to give each other some tolerance, right? And that's part of this process of being patient. Patient is part of being a loving person. And part of caring is being patient with people. Now, the other side of this is understanding that not all people are we going to be able to work with. Some people are screwed up beyond what we can do, right? And we have to recognize our own capabilities. So when we look, what I've created here is the moral relativism spectrum. And I also call this the psychoscale. Now, what I did was create this in sort of a silly way, so I don't have to necessarily offend anyone. You can choose to familiarize yourself with any of these characters. It's up to you. And some of them are going to remind you of people you know. But if you look on the green side of the moral relativism spectrum of the psychoscale, what you see is Eeyore and Rabbit and Owl and Pooh and Piglet and Tigger. These are characters that represent different personality types. And I'm not saying that any of these personality types are worse or better than the other. I just sort of sprinkled them around on the green side of the spectrum. Eeyore, actually, the depressed guy. I've known depressed people, or they're kind of on the downside of life, that are the hardest workers and the most sincere, loving, empathetic people. It does not make a person bad. Rabbit sometimes has a hard time getting along with Tigger because they have very different personalities. Yet all these characters are very caring. They all care about each other. Neither of them want to steal from one another or enslave one another. So these are the type of people we can work with. We need to recognize their different personalities, and that sometimes personalities are going to clash, and that we can work through these things. We can work through these people that understand morality, basically, that aren't out to hurt one another, that are not okay with justifying bad behavior. But when you start to get to the other side of the spectrum, we start to see people like this Gaston character, what we tend to call as people that are completely egotistical, that are caught up in their own self. I think they're so great. You know, they think their shit doesn't stink, right? These people become so egotistical that they start to justify their egotistical behavior. Narcissist. You know, narcissists are kind of like starting to get out of the good spectrum of people that are morally in the right place, because a narcissist will justify bad behavior. You know, I did that because you weren't acting right. You know, they'll blame their bad behavior on something you did, which is not taking responsibility for your own emotions. So when you start getting into these people, or like the next one I got here is the zombie character, right, from Plants and Zombies, that represents people that are kind of go along to get along. And that's kind of not a good way to be, because they will be the first ones to compromise their morals when it doesn't work out for them. So when you start to see indications of this type of behavior from people, you recognize, well, that's kind of on the wrong side of moral relativism and the psycho scale. They're starting to become psychopathic, you know? And obviously it's a scale. It can be far worse. You know, you think of Daffy Duck. I don't know if he belongs that far over, but he was always a character who was in it for himself, and, you know, not always trying to do what's best for the community. And so, you know, you got to be careful with people when they start to behave and share these aspects of themselves that come from mostly trauma and being hurt. They're going to justify crappy behavior. You know, Darth Vader, you're getting into the real psychopaths, right? The sociopaths, right? Maybe Luke Skywalker was finally able to convince his father that, you know, he was doing the wrong thing, and he'd finally win against the Emperor. So maybe he wasn't completely on the psycho end scale, because there was some bringing him back. But he's pretty far down that scale, right? Doing a lot of evil things, hurting a lot of people, and justifying it. So there's all levels. You know, when you get into like the Sauron and the Emperor, you know, there's really no saving these people at this point. They probably have to get eliminated from this earth in some way or another. I think it's good to keep our hearts open to people, and to always hope the best for people, and always provide that door for people who earn it and deserve it. But why waste our time when we're working on a project to try to teach freedom of trying to do a project with someone who has a Darth Vader personality? They're going to keep destroying the project, or a narcissist, or a zombie, right? They're going to keep making choices that are best going to work out for them. And when you start noticing that in people, it becomes obvious and clear that they're not on the right side of the spectrum. They're still justifying bad behavior. So this is about us developing our discernment and seeing people for what they are, and recognizing that it's one thing to try to reach out to people when you have extra energy and time and money and trying to help people. That's great. But when we're trying to get a project done, and we're trying to create a presentation or a documentary to help teach people about truth or natural law or freedom, we need to be working with people that are on the good side of the scale, that understand morality, that understand objective morality, that the things we do matter, that aren't justifying bad behavior. So these are the people we want to seek out and work with and make connections with, that we're going to be able to build that trust, because, like I said before, we share those core values. So keep this silly picture in your head when you meet people, and when you reach out to people, when you start to take these next steps in making connections, and consider it. Are these people you're talking to making actions and saying things that are moral, or are they justifying bad behavior? And this will help you discern, not wasting your time and energy and getting burned again by people that make you feel like you can't team up or combine your efforts with other people. Many of us have been traumatized by past relationships and experiences. And that's partly because we're dealing with people that have been traumatized, like I said, brain damage, through all these systems and all these cultural problems we have in the systems of slavery that are creating masses of people that are Daffy Ducks, zombies, Garstons, and emperors, right? And those are people that can be very hard to convince of truth. Maybe they'll learn on their own sometime. But where we're concentrating, we're looking for the Tiggers, the Piglets, the Poos, the Eeyores, people we can work with. And then even with them, it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to work with their different personalities, right? And that's not always easy. It takes a lot of effort. And that's what we're going to start talking about in this next section. is how do we actually do that? How do we actually get through these problems? And I wanted to point out that we can make one of these slides for each of these personalities. There's many different personalities, and it's important to learn about personalities and how people act. But basically, generally, we're looking for people that kind of have more like the Pooh personality. They exemplify patience and calmness. They show that they're caring people. They prove it by their deeds and their actions. They're curious. They're fun-loving. They want to learn. Learning is fun. Like I said with the actors, when we work together, it is fun, right? It's not fun when you have to work with someone who's vengeful, wants to get you back, or who's spiteful because you got something they didn't, who's angry at you and won't forgive you even though you apologize, right? It's not bad to be angry. Anger is a natural emotion. But if you're merciless, if you're violent, and you're not a good person in that moment when you're doing those not good things. And if you see people consistently making those choices in their life, they're not the people that you want to team up with and combine your efforts with. They're the people you want to avoid for the most part. In this process of becoming truth speakers in the world and working towards this change, whether it be maybe you're writing a book together and ghostwriting it with another person, you need to spend your time making sure that the person you're working with is on the same page and is not a psycho. And that takes some time and energy. Get together with somebody, have a meal with them, discuss things with them, make sure they're on the same page, form a group. Mastermind group is a good opportunity to meet other people and see where they're all about. Create a weekly meeting. You can create a Facebook group. There's all kinds of social media groups that allow this opportunity to meet people and to take some time and see what they're all about before you get in too deep and find out that you're actually working with Sauron. You're maybe working with the enemy. And people are so often worried or concerned about controlled opposition, people working within our movements that are actually from the evil side. That's true. They're going to be out there. But if you use this discernment method, you'll be able to spot them very quickly, and they won't be able to corrupt you because you know what's right? And that's really what it's all about. Each of us has to be trained to have the skill, the willpower, and the intelligence to move forward in this battle. So it's a personal journey. And I like this slide because one of my favorite movies is The Princess Bride. And the man in black, the Dread Pirate Roberts, is here you see with the sword fighting the Spaniard. He had to defeat the Spaniard. He had to defeat Andre the Giant, the mighty giant, and he had to defeat the intelligent leader of this little gang that was holding the princess. And to me, it's a really good symbol because it's a three-pronged thing. Like, we have to have the mental aptitude, the spiritual aptitude, and the physical aptitude to move forward in this game. And that really requires a lot of motivation on each of us part to keep working on ourselves, to build up our skills, our internet skills, our communication skills, dealing with our own traumas, to build up our willpower and our initiative to move forward, even though it seems impossible, even though it seems like we're outnumbered and outgunned, like I said, in the technology of our enemies, the tyrannical forces in the world. And we have to have the intelligence, which means, both the left and the right-brained even view of things and being able to see things for what they are. So we each need to build ourselves up into this hero, like the Dread Pirate Roberts, who was able to save the princess. And then we're able to work as a team when each of us shows up with the training, the skill, the willpower, and the intelligence. We'll all be great team members and group members when we work on ourselves and build ourselves up to that point where we're a strong warrior. And so that's the goal. It's not easy. I'm not trying to say he had to climb the cliffs of insanity to get there, right? That's the situation we're in. We're on the cliffs of insanity. So we need to climb hand over hand, step over step, block by block until we're able to reach the top. And the princess symbolizes our freedom or the future of humanity. So, I took this picture. I think it was a picture that showed people on a boat passing a bucket along, and it reminds me of an experience I had in Mexico building a house where we did it like bucket brigade style. Trucks showed up and a bunch of bricks were unloaded, blocks to build a house, blocks, and we handed them across one person to another, with 30 people moving hundreds and hundreds of blocks in a very short time. It was so amazing to see. And this is how people used to put out fires, right? The bucket brigade. It's very possible. And what it does is symbolize that once we do get on the same page with other people, we make those connections with people, we begin to communicate, we get past the communication, we get good at the communication, then we can coordinate and cooperate with other people. And once we start doing that, things get so much easier. It's just like the bucket brigade. We just hand things along. Who's good at video processing? You do the video processing. Who's good at finding pictures? You do the picture finding. When everybody's doing what they're good at and they love, we can just hand a project along and we can all knock it out and get it done. So be inspired. It's not impossible. We see it in lots of things. We just have to do it, one bucket at a time. Okay, this last section is called action. Okay, so we're well acquainted with this problem, right? And we understand the importance of working together, and that somehow or another it's a crucial aspect to moving things forward. In terms of the world dynamic changing and humans not going further into the direction of slavery and authoritarianism and tyranny, that means that the masses of people have to realize that that's not the way they want things, and work towards a better future. That's going to require the masses of people, because right now the power is in the hands of the few. We've all studied this dynamic. So what are the actions we're going to actually take? Day to day, tomorrow, the next day, the day after. That's where I really wanted to concentrate on this presentation, and this last section is really for you to take home these ideas, to sleep on them, to think about them, and integrate them into your thinking and your day-to-day life, so that you can make these connections with other people, begin to coordinate and cooperate, because we need you. We need every one of you. Anyone watching this, we need you. This is not going to work with just a few people making presentations online. We need a lot of people, whether it's presentations, whether it's just like we have in Funnel. There's some people that dance. There's some people that sing. There's some people that write. There's some people that make art, visual art. We need all of you. And yet, none of you can do it all by yourself. Many of you are lacking certain skills. That's why we have to come together, right? And share our skills and share what we have. Here's another quick clip I'm going to share with you.
At any rate, it seems I've lost my religion.
I put no stock in religion. By the word religion, I've seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God. Holiness is in right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves. And goodness. What God desires is here and here. And what you decide to do every day, you will be a good man. Or not.
So, what he says is that every day, every moment, the actual decision of being a good person or not is up to you and what you do. And it's about your heart and your mind. And I think this is a really important point. Many people get caught up in the traps of religion and symbols and ideology, but really it's about every moment and what you do and where your heart is and where your mind is and the actions that you actually take. And besides that, it's all just the past and the future and a bunch of ideas. So really what it breaks down to for most of us in a practical terms is doing that inner work within the self and having our heart and our mind aligned and knowing what's right in every moment. And that gets really confusing when we're emotional, when we lose control of our emotions, when we lose control of the self, right? Now it's one thing to be angry because we know we're in the right and someone has harmed us. That's different. We don't lose our compass of morality. However, for many of us, I think my worst moments are sometimes when I get a little worn down, when I haven't been maintaining my health as good as I should have, or allow myself to get worked up in some emotional trauma from my past of my life. As we work through these things and we're honest with ourselves, we recognize that our emotions are ours and not anybody else. It's not somebody else's fault you're upset in most cases. And of course, when someone wrongs you, there's good reason to be upset, and to practice self-defense. However, for the most part, your emotions are completely yours to deal with. How you react to a thing is completely up to you, and that is your responsibility. And when we take this bull by the horns, other people notice that we have done the inner work and that we're not lying to ourselves, and that we're able to apologize when we make a mistake, or we're able to see where someone's coming from and show empathy when we need to. And then we're also able to use the self-defense principle and not let people tread on us when we understand our emotions. So this is like the big part of the work here, is getting hold of our emotions and understanding what's going on with them and why we're having the reactions that we are. Okay, so what is your big obstacle? What's holding you back? You know, I would like each of you to spend some time, you know, just take a few days and just let that big rock question loom in your mind for a minute. What is your big obstacle? What's holding you back from doing the things we're talking about? From connecting with other freedom-minded individuals, from going out into your community and finding people, right? Whether that's making advertisements, whether that's getting on social media, whether that's standing on a corner with a sign somewhere. Whatever you got to do, there's a way to do it. And there are things that are holding you back right now from doing that. And as soon as we are able to point out exactly what those things are and point at them and look at them square in the face, it's going to be pretty hard to get around them. This picture shows the kid holding the rock as if he's holding up that rock, when the truth is it's a supposed picture. All he has to do is move to the side, right? And that rock's not going to fall, but in theory, some of our big obstacles will move themselves if we get out of their way. Many of them are things we've created in our own mind, obstinate thoughts. They seem like immovable objects. When we face reality, we actually have to be very honest with ourselves, like I talked about in the last slide. We can maintain hope by recognizing that our biggest obstacle is something that we've created in our own mind. And the actual solutions are little steps we take. And many of those little steps are recognizing that a lot of the things, like I've said, in the world that have caused us damage, that have psychologically damaged us, can now become our traits that make us like superheroes. I like to use Spider-Man. Spider-Man got bit by the radioactive spider, right? And he became a superhero who has radioactive spider strength. Well, that's kind of like symbolic of the traumas we get in the world when we get damaged. It's hard for us to do things. We can go into our shell, we can get wounded, we can get frustrated. But opposition can be something that inspires us to do better, or it can be something that weakens us. So what I challenge you to do is look at your past traumas, look at the things that are holding you back, and turn them around into your strengths and become a superhero, because you can look at your trauma and now you can actually help other people with that trauma, getting around it, as soon as you're able to look at it square in the face and deal with it. How do you do that? How do you deal with your big life problems? Well, one aspect of dealing with these things is recognizing that there's unresolved trauma cycles, cyclical cycles in our life where the same things keep coming back and back. This is kind of part of the reality of the existence we're living in that sort of exemplifies natural law. If you don't deal with a problem or solve a problem, it keeps coming back in a different way. And it's the same thing as Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown. We do it to ourselves in our own minds, in our own daily lives. We keep falling for the same tricks, right? We've all experienced this. How do we get out of this cycle? How do we get out of the unresolved trauma cycles? A lot of us have terrible things that happen in our childhood that we're still dealing with. And what's happening is we're still telling ourselves stories in our head about why we act a certain way. We're still making up these stories. Well, I was so traumatized that now I have to keep drinking a ridiculous amount of alcohol every day to feel better. You know, that's a story someone's telling themselves to try to justify their behavior, which is like holding you back from doing the thing you're doing. Like I'm saying, an obstinate, you know, we have addiction problems. We have mental hang-ups. And the way we start to see these is to look at our own story. Look at the story you're telling yourself in your head. The only thing that really exists is the reality of the moment you're in. Am I okay right now? Is my body okay right now? Is there anything that's actually damaging me right now? All those other thoughts of the past and the future are made up, and they're not real. The only thing that's real is the moment you're in right now, and everything else is a story. And when you come to recognize that, you're able to be a lot more you're doing in life and the choices you're making. So recognize your own stories and your own tales you're telling, and you can actually start changing those stories and telling better stories, right? Tell yourself you're doing great, self. Yeah, you made some mistakes in the past, but we're trying, we're getting it. You got to encourage yourself. You got to bring yourself up. And that's partly listening to the own narrative going in your own mind, and that's part of your own obstacles. I know many of us are hard on ourselves, but really so often the root of the problem, where these things come from, are things that happen much younger in our life. We've been traumatized. For me, one of them was school. Being cut down by people who were acting like they knew more than I did, and like they were my authority. It left a mark, and I spent many years of kind of self-doubt and low confidence because of some of the ways I was treated as a child. But now that I'm getting to the root of the problem, I realize it's up to me to become confident, and part of that process for me is becoming a podcaster and a presenter, and not being afraid to speak out, and not caring what people think if they disagree with me, even though I'm saying things that are very extremely different from what the mainstream are saying. And part of that is doing the self-work. It's looking back in your own life and getting to the root of the problem. And you can do this if you concentrate on it, if you take the time to do it, and if you need to, reach out and get some help from somebody who cares or who's experienced. Another presenter in the Funnel Conference is Leslie Powers, an excellent therapist, someone that you might want to reach out to, like her, similar to her, that have that ability to help with problems. And I'm not sure that you know somebody, but if you seek somebody, you will find somebody, right? And you ask, you look for help, knock, and the door will be opened. It takes initiative, willpower, like I said in the past, to get to the root of your own problems. And it's work, just like everything else. And it might have to be done before you can make this transition to be working on a team that's working for freedom and creating presentations and documentaries. You might have to do some of your self-work before you're able to really work effectively with other people. Others of you are ready to go. You've been doing this self-work. You know the problems, and the only thing holding you back is that push, that drive, removing that obstacle. If you're having a lot of mood problems, you know, maybe you're, like I was saying, one of these Eeyore people that just kind of have a down personality. There's great cures for mood problems. Exercise, friendship, getting out in nature always helps me when I'm in a bad mood. Vigorous exercise is one of the best cures for anxiety and depression. And I've experienced a lot of anxiety and depression, trust me. Having a regular exercise routine, having walks you go on, having music you listen to, and people you talk to are crucial to get through these problems that we're all going to face, and some of us more than others. And then also the will to want to do it, the will to not keep getting stuck in that same cycle you've been stuck in, the focus, keep yourself on track, have somebody you check in with every week or every other day if you need to help get you back on the straight and narrow. You know, if you're stuck in your addiction problems, you might have to seek help with people that have been through it. You know, I had a great talk with Jonathan Wright, a member on the One Great Work Network, who dealt with a lot of issues with addiction in the past. He's somebody you might want to discuss that with, somebody who's been through it, right? They can give you the advice and tips you need to get through those problems. It takes will. And then overall, the number one thing is being grateful and thankful. And this universe has given you a wonderful gift of life, an opportunity to be a hero in this time of great tumultuous change in the world. This is a gift. It's an opportunity for you to be thankful for and appreciate. The opportunity to be a hero, the opportunity to be a freedom fighter is right in front of you. It's the door is open. And I'm grateful to be here speaking to you today. Grateful that those of you who have made it this far and are listening, and I hope you're inspired to not give up easy. And really, that's what it comes down to. You know, each of us do have to carry our own weight. We have to do our own personal work. But that being said, when we've done that, we have a little extra to give, and we can help someone else out. That's how we change that cyclical cycle of the individual getting beat up over and over. By groups working together, look at these ants. They can carry many times their weight, and most of us can do the same. There's plenty to go around. In a community where most people are giving, there can be a few people that are slacking, and we can make up the difference. Right now we have a society where the majority are slacking and not doing their job and not taking responsibility for their own emotions even, much less their responsibilities in life, right? So we need to start with these simple things. If you have extra to give, be generous by all means. You only live one life. Do you want to die being a miser with lots of money in your bank account? How's that going to matter when you cross over? Do you think you're going to be you know, who knows what happens after this life? But I'm thinking everything matters, folks, and I'm pretty sure that it does from all the stories I've read and heard about people that have had experiences after death. There is a reckoning when you die. So this moment is your gift from the universe. And so much of our problems, like I was saying, the obstacles that we create for ourselves has to do with the perspective we're looking at it from. And that's why it's so important to have other people in your life and to build communities and be part of networks. Because sometimes we get stuck in our own heads and we see things with, our own visors and our own little narrow viewpoint. And when we talk to other people, hate it when I touch the mic, and we get other people's opinions on things, it gives us perspective and it gives us ideas we wouldn't have had other. And when we put our ideas together and we combined our thoughts, that's part of the wonder of having a conference like this. Hearing all these different points of views and perspectives, we can take the best from each and we get this new perspective that we didn't have. And that's part of reality, and that's part of why we are individuals that are interconnected in this universe, right? That's part of the purpose and the intelligence behind all of this. So get perspective on the situation. Get out of your own head. It's not doing you any good just being alone in your own apartment, in your own room, on your own computer. It's going to take other perspectives and points of views besides just watching people's videos, interacting with people, right? You see the people on the lake here rowing, or the ocean on these rowboats. It takes everybody synchronized, making the same movement at the same time. That doesn't mean they don't have individual choice. That doesn't mean they can't get out of the boat when they want. Everybody has individual choice, but we are kind of on a boat right now because we're surrounded with problems in the world that will drown us. And so what we need to do is form groups that are all rowing in the same direction at the same time towards freedom, towards truth. And this is just a slide to inspire you and encourage you that that's the way things get done, folks. We got to rise up to the next level. We got to recognize that we're not alone. We're like the geese. We're birds of a flock. There are many, many humans on this earth, and we're all connected into each other. So if you don't have a good friend, that's something you can cultivate and work on and grow. And you're going to need it, especially in the coming times where it's likely that things are going to get more difficult in the physical realm. So we can strengthen ourselves so we can survive. It's really about survival. We have to do this to survive, is to form cohesive groups and to form networks and to form tribes, whatever it takes, so that we can rely on one another, people that we trust that understand morality. So it's a reciprocal type relationship. We help others so they can help us, so they can help all of us, right? And that doesn't mean we're collectivists. That doesn't mean that we're owned by others. We can all have our individual choice and work together. And so like I talked about it, there's many tips and hints: reading, going for walks, repeating mantras, exercise, poetry, methods of expression of art, listening to music, breathing practices. I'm a big proponent of Wim Hof breathing and Wim Hof cold treatment. Yoga, like these are wonderful things. Studying, these things bring you energy. They give you energy to help out other people. And ultimately, I would recommend and encourage you to only get your downloads from the source. And what I mean by that is when you spend time in nature or within your own self in meditation or in deep thought or in clear thought, clear sober thought, you get the best answers, right? It's gonna help to talk with other people and communicate, like I'm saying, but ultimately you have to be able to discriminate things from the inside. And when you can connect to the greater whole, the all, the great intelligence, then you can receive the best answers. And I have something I've talked about in many episodes before, which is what I call the 3-day process of asking a question to the universe, to the God, to all, inside of your own mind, inside of your own heart and soul, honestly, and giving it some time. And you'll see around you, little answers will pop up here and there. It's just like knocking, the door will open, ask, and the answers will come. Get your downloads from the source, not from the media, not from other people. I mean, you want to listen to other people, but ultimately you have to be able to decide and what's right. So ultimately, what is the most powerful weapon we have? What is the most powerful weapon? It is all these little weapons I have in the little pictures. Is it the tank? Is it the tools we use? Is it the knives? No. It's our connection to each other. It's the power of unity. If we're united in principle, and we're united on freedom, self-defense, and we never back down on those things, and the individual right to choose, and we are 100% united on those principles, first principles, we can't be defeated. And that is what it's going to take to change the dynamic in the world. And that is the ultimate weapon that we need to conquer evil. Thanks, folks, for listening to this presentation. I appreciate your time and energy, and thank you very much. If you would consider checking out endevil.life, and I have a contact Chris page. If you got any questions, you want to talk to me, hit me up on the email. Through with this conference, I'm going to be working with the folks who have signed up for the One Great Work Warriors email list on chrisjantzen.com. You'll be hearing from me soon. Please be patient, folks who have already signed up. So that's part of my work, trying to build this community and trying to build a team of warriors who are doing the type of thing that we're doing here. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And be motivated, be inspired, get out in the world, make a difference. It does matter. We're living through the most important time in history, and the time is now to make the change, folks.